the big things that we do, obviously, is we have our own internal systems. You don't believe everything that you hear. So evaluating a property is critical. And what you're going to learn at the Deal Magnet, what you're going to learn with the investors over at the sellmyhouse.com side of things is how to evaluate properties. There's two things you got to know right off the bat. Is it a retail property or is it a wholesale property? And these are two different things. A retail property is typically going to be an end user. Who's the person that's going to move into it? A wholesale property, there's typically a third party involved, and a lot of times it's somebody that's going to rent that property, and they're looking at cash flow. So you've got to be able to lock down that property at a price where you can mark it up, make it a nice little profit margin for yourself, but also make sure that guy's cash flowing it. And a good number right now is 10%. Investors are looking for 10% on their money. Is a good number for you when you're trying to figure out what to wholesale that property for. If you overprice it, it's not going to sell. $100,000 is a very good number. If it's over $100,000, except in places like California, it's not a wholesale property. Typically, you're in the $50,000 range, give or take $25,000. That's your prime wholesale type property where you can tack on, 10, 25%, something like that, make anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000, and still do it in a way where the end guy who's buying it to retail it, to rehab it, to rent it, is still making money. Another big thing to consider is current market value, tax assessments. Now in Florida it seems like tax assessments have come down. I know in other parts of the country they have not. So you have to take the tax assessment with a grain of salt. Look at that number, know the number. You really need to know the number to figure out what the tax level is. But do a comp, do a CMA, get a realtor to do a comp for you. Don't believe everything you read there. In our system, we do internal review. Basically, we are looking at all the things that have sold within a half mile to a mile in the last 3 to 4 months. We want a real good comp. And we are also looking at what's on the market. What is our competition going to be? So that you know exactly where to price this thing. How do you negotiate a purchase price until you know what the thing's going to sell for? Use the end game is really what is the range, because you can't predict it. There's no way you can put a number on it and say it's a $150,000 house. Figure out what the range is. Use the bottom end of that range as your negotiating tool. That's what Scott and Todd and I do. That's when we're negotiating deals. Here's the market value. It's $150. If we get it. If we agree on a price with the seller, the next step is always, especially if you're retailing, is always an inspection. If you're wholesaling, that's not necessarily something that you have to do, but you kind of need to know what the thing's got to have done to it so you can reprice it. Make sure you have a good idea of it. If you don't, ask. Send an email, call, and say, hey, listen, this thing needs a roof, it needs a kitchen. What do you think the costs are going to be? Again, you cannot negotiate a purchase price and a sale price without knowing all of that stuff. It is critical. To give you a little bit of information in terms of what to expect when you're buying a property. When you're wholesaling a property, what we would call minor repairs, call it anything 10,000 and under. You're talking about paint, carpet, maybe fixing some cabinetry, maybe replacing some countertops. You're not gutting a house. That's basically a $10,000 minor rehab and under. That's how you resell it and you repackage it to a wholesaler. Very little work. For the most part, you don't want to be anywhere over 60 cents on the dollar for the most part. That's your purchase price, and you're probably going to retail that thing no more than 70 cents over the dollar. In a market that's going down, your percentages need to go down as well. Moderate rehab is up towards that $20,000 numbers, and this is where you're replacing kitchens and replacing bathrooms. You got to be real careful on this stuff now, because one mistake, your profit is gone. When you're wholesaling something, make sure that you explain it is moderate rehab. You've got to get that thing at, call it 40 cents on the dollar. If you can get something at 40 cents on the dollar, you can turn around and market it at 50 cents on the dollar, sell it at 70 cents on the dollar. The big stuff that we're completely staying away from right now are the major rehabs, the structural, HVAC, all of that stuff. If there's big problems with these things, we avoid them like the plague right now. Our best properties nowadays are, especially in the southern parts of the state, or southern parts of the country, are properties that were built 3, 4, 5 years ago that need very little work. It's all cosmetic. You negotiate the best price you can and turn around and wholesale it. Try to get a very good idea as to what work needs to be done, because if you don't know, you can't resell it. That's critical.
Anytime you get an opportunity that looks like a deal. We want you to kind of pre-screen it. Okay, there's a couple of key websites we use just to get an idea and a feel for the value. Okay, number one is a site like cyberhomes.com. Cyberhomes.com. Number two, Zillow.com. Number three is the tax information on the county website. You get that information, you can get an idea of a range. It's not always accurate, especially in this day and time. But we want to get a feel for it to see if, as it says, is it a deal? Number four is going to a site like Google Earth to kind of get a feel for the neighborhood. Guys, we don't want to be buying in complete war zones where the house is about to fall down. I mean, it needs to be a nice property. You know, it needs to be in an area that we can move. But for the most part, we want them to be nice little properties that we can, that the value's there, and we can lock it down and resell as quick as possible. Now, once you've pre-screened it with this, and the numbers make sense, there's a profit margin there to begin with. We want to be at least at 60% of current market value minus repairs. Okay, so you're pre-screening it with these local sites. Anytime you're out physically looking at the neighborhood and inspecting it, you want to go around to the other houses that are for sale in that area, whether it's a for sale by owner or if it's a listed property. Go out and grab the brochures. Many times they've got brochures right in the front yard. Pull those. Let's see what they're selling those houses for. That'll give us an idea of retail value. Okay. The last step, guys, of course, we have our own internal evaluation. We're going to run it through our realtor network to get the most accurate comps we can, because ideally we want to get the most recently sold comparables within 3 months or less of the properties that have sold most recently, and what is the price range. Okay, so that's how we're going to evaluate it. If we don't have a realtor in that area, it's going to be your job as a local partner to develop those relationships, to have a key strategic team player who we can go to and say, hey, you know, what are houses selling for in this neighborhood? We think we've got a deal. We need your help on some comps. So it's all about relationship and getting those numbers as accurate as possible, because that price is key before we write a contract and before we start remarketing the property. We need to know where we stand and if there's enough equity to make it a deal.